Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is now streaming on Netflix, but before you gather the kids around to watch this film, you may want to screen it yourself. Here's my review of Del Toro's Pinocchio. It is beautiful. Aside from the mature themes, which I think is not as family centric as you would think an animated feature about Pinocchio would be, it is one of the most beautiful stop motion animated features I've seen in my lifetime. It's very beautiful. GDT is absolutely going to get a Best Animated Feature Oscar nomination, but I don't think he's going to get a Best Picture nomination, and I no longer think he's a shoo-in to win. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is adult animation. The themes in this film are very adult. They tapped into the grim tales within Pinocchio, and though this film is rated PG, I think it's for mature audiences. The mature situations include fascism, cruelty, grief, death, dishonesty. I mean, there are a lot of mature themes. For an animated feature, I just think there's too much to unpack for kids. The imagery can be graphic at times, although very beautiful. It's cinematically beautiful, but there's the backdrop of war and again fascism, cruelty, grief, dishonesty, death. There's just so much to unpack. There are many adventures that Pinocchio goes on, and I think this feature film would have been better suited for a limited series. Then that way parents might have had an easier way to unpack the mature themes if it were a limited series. It's certainly long enough, and there's so much story to make it a limited series. It might have been better to make it a limited series and Pinocchio go on the different adventures. That might have been better for GDT's iteration of Pinocchio. It's interesting that at its core, this iteration of Pinocchio is about loneliness, and rather than Geppetto's emptiness or this void he feels grieving his son be filled with a romantic love interest, it's filled with an immortal puppet that survives him. And I thought that was interesting because a lot of story, grim tales on, are rooted in love interest, your soulmate, and so forth. And for this story, it stays about father and son, and there is something very tender about that. And I think GDT really tapped into that centralized theme of the story. So I thought that was just a really warm touch. At the core of this story, it really is about a father's love for his son. What's also interesting is that Pinocchio lies to save his father's life. And as we all know about the story about Pinocchio, is that every time he lies, his nose grows longer. And the moral of the story is to be honest to yourself and your soul for healing. And that third act where Pinocchio does save everyone from the belly of the beast by lying, and they're obvious lies, it just seems circumventional. But I think it's a fantastic film The score is very whimsical, and Pinocchio is very beautiful. Cinematically, it's very beautiful, but I'm second guessing myself because I instinctively thought, oh yes, this is going to sweep. I mean, this is going to beat everyone in Best Animated Feature at the Oscars, but I actually don't think it is such a shoe-in because of the themes. It's very, very mature. The closest competition, which I don't think is Puss in Boots, if the closest competition is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, I think that story is more universal and connects us in a way that Pinocchio might not connect us all, even though Pinocchio looks better, and it had to. It obviously it has the legend GDT, but it also had more money to work with than Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which was more of an indie film. So for an indie film with a micro budget to be competition for Pinocchio, I think that's telling. I think Marcel the Shell with Shoes On has a great chance to win the Oscar this year. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is now streaming on Netflix, and the making of his Pinocchio is also streaming on Netflix.